Ladies and gentlemen, please find your seats. The program will begin momentarily. This would be a great time to silence all of your electronic devices, the courtesy of those around you and the speakers on stage. The program is about to begin. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Bruce Friend, Chief Operating Officer, iNACOL.
Welcome. Welcome. I hope you've enjoyed your lunch. That's a really fantastic song to walk up to. Amazing. I say that because hopefully you feel the symposium has been amazing. Thank you. We're thrilled, and amazing describes the presenters that we've had up on this stage. Amazing describes the presenters that have had an opportunity to share their work over the last several days, this afternoon and tomorrow, throughout the breakout sessions. Amazing describes all of you and the work that you're doing back in your schools. That's truly amazing for our students. So thank you for spending your time with us this week as well. In a few short minutes, I'm going to have the opportunity to also introduce you to some, again, I'll use the word amazing educators and students as well. But before that, I do want to make sure that we take time to also honor, I'm going to use this word one more time, amazing sponsors that help us make this event possible. Without their support, we could not provide the excellence that we have here at the symposium. So I want to take a quick moment to thank all of our sponsors who've made this possible for us. Our diamond sponsors include Excellus, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, Chan Zuckerberg Initiative, eDynamic Learning, KnowledgeWorks, Lincoln Learning Solutions, New Schools Venture Fund, Pearson, and the Walton Family Foundation. I'd also like to thank our Emerald sponsors, APAS Education Group, Blackboard, Apex Learning, the Buck Institute for Education, Dreambox Learning, Edgenuity, Edmentum, Education Elements, Florida Virtual School, Genius, HMH, Maui Learning, Office Depot, Reading Horizons, Rosetta Stone, Strong Mind, and also thank you to our Topaz sponsors, Accelerate Education, Amazon Education, Curriculum Associates, Edison Learning, Fuel Education, Hapara, It's Learning, LearnZillion, OdysseyWare, StudyForge, United Data Technologies, and Zia Learning. Please join me in thanking all of our sponsors. We're going to start this afternoon, as we've done in prior years. We've had the real honor to say thank you to some outstanding people across our field whose work is influencing your work, whose work we can all learn from, and who've done just an incredible job in their field, and our award recipients for 2016. Each year that we've had these awards, the number of nominees across our field and the number of nominees that we receive continues to grow and grow, just as that's reflective of how our field has grown as well. Those of you that are in the awards committee, many of you are in this room right now, you know that what I'm about to say is true. The number of awards nominations that we get every year not only increases in volume, but it becomes especially difficult more and more each year to separate out. They're all, you want to say, all worthy of and be recognized for the great work that they do. But we have some winners here today whose work really stands out, and we want to start our afternoon with that. So we're going to start with the Research Award, if I may, and I'm going to share a little bit about the Research award to you. The purpose of the Research Award is to recognize outstanding researchers whose work demonstrates new breakthroughs or replicable advances in the field that promote excellence in personalized learning and teaching. This year's Research Award winner is Dr. Susan Poyo from the Franciscan University of Steubenville. Dr. Poyo's research results support the hypothesis that the use of online instruction modules positively affects pre-service teachers' attitudes, knowledge, and skills, and instructional centeredness towards the integration of technology in the digital learning environment. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Susan Poyo and congratulating her for this recognition.
It's a tremendous privilege to be here today to receive this award. Thank you to iNACOL for validating the partnership between K-12 schools and teacher preparation programs. And there's so much more that we can do together for learning. The saying goes that we stand on the shoulders of giants that have gone before us. And in this case, many thanks to the giants and the great minds that I found in Catherine Kennedy and Leanna Archambault for their original research and motivation in including teacher educators in this conversation. I'm also indebted to the many researchers and practitioners invested in unpacking the TPAC and the SAMR models in order to keep our instruction student-centered. Thank you to my colleagues at Franciscan University, my family, 3 of which are here today, and ultimately to God for his faithfulness, his love, and his mercy. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Dr. Poyo. Congratulations. Very well done. Our next award is our Innovative Practice Award. This award is to recognize a person, school, or program, or organizations whose innovative practices or policies serve as a model for K-12 personalized learning, ultimately leading to new learning environments and opportunities for our students and increased student achievement. The winner of this year's award is Dr. Daryl Adams in the Coachella Valley Unified School District. A little bit about Coachella and Dr. Adams. Prior to the implementation of mobile learning initiatives, students and families around the communities of Coachella Valley Unified School District did not have access to technology. In fact, many classrooms lacked computers. There was a major digital divide between the students from the district and neighboring school districts. In taking the position of superintendent, Dr. Adams knew that these were some of the major challenges that needed to be made. Since the implementation of the Mobile Learning Initiative, the district has seen many positive results. Students are more engaged in the classroom and more connected with their teachers. High school graduation rate has raised from 72% to 84%, and students involved in personalized learning opportunities have a 98% graduation rate. Students are coding, creating their own videos, learning, creating their own projects, and connecting with students all across the world. Unfortunately, as Susan Patrick mentioned yesterday, Dr. Adams is not able to be with us here today. So please, let's give him a round of applause, and we'll accept this award on his behalf. The Outstanding Contribution Award, the Outstanding Contribution to K-12 Blended Online Learning Award is given to an individual whose insight and innovation has significantly increased the credibility and advancement of K-12 personalized learning. This award is a tribute to that individual's outstanding work and leadership in the field and recognizes an overall body of work, not merely an isolated breakthrough. The recipient of this year's award is Dr. Jim Rickabaugh from the Institute for Personal Learning. Dr. Rickabaugh was instrumental in founding the Institute for Personal Learning in 2010. While still superintendent of the school district of Whitefish, Wisconsin, Dr. Rickabaugh led the collaborative writing of a white paper, Transforming Publication, a Call to Action. Dr. Rickabaugh understood then that in order for personalized learning to be successful, we first need to have a deep understanding of 3 core components: learner profiles, customized learning paths, and proficiency-based progress. As one area superintendent said, Jim has provided the vision for student-centered learning and has transformed the lens of how to plan instruction with students, not just for them. Congratulations, Dr. Jim Rickabaugh.
Well, thank you to iNACOL for this recognition, but even more importantly for the emerging vision that iNACOL represents on behalf of all of us. It is truly a powerful and forward-looking view of what we need to do for kids. 6 years ago when we started this work, if you said personalized learning, it was like shouting in a barrel. Very few people had any concept of what it meant, at least in the context we're talking about it today. We're really fortunate in the parent organization for the Institute for Personalized Learning. The Board of Control for CISA 1 had a vision for what this could be, and we're willing to put some funds forward to get it started. And I've had the amazing opportunity to work with a very talented and dedicated team over the past 6 years to move this work forward. But maybe most importantly are the courageous, creative, dedicated educators who've been a part of this work, part of the network of the Institute for Personalized Learning. And the really good news is they're spread throughout this hall today. In fact, if you're from a school district that's a part of the network for the Institute for Personalized Learning, would you stand up? Let's give these people a hand. They've done really magnificent work. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And the last award that we're going to honor someone with this afternoon is our Teacher of the Year Award. The iNACOL Teacher of the Year Award is given to a K-12 educator whose efforts as a personalized teacher exemplify the highest degree of their commitment to student success, knowledge, and their skill as a professional educator and dedication to the field of personalized learning. Our award winner this year is Trixie DeRosa Davis from the South Carolina Department of Education. Story about Trixie. When she was 11, 12 years old, she was a 7th grader in South Carolina. She was told by her school that her grades did not qualify for her. She did not have the test scores to take the only world language course that the school offered. She did not have the test scores to take the only world language course that her school offered. Trixie was not going to take that sitting down. Trixie wrote a letter, not to the world language teacher, not to the principal, not to the district superintendent. Trixie wrote a letter to the state school superintendent in South Carolina, ended up on the desk in Columbia. Trixie got enrolled in that world language course later that year. And she stands here today, many years later, well, not many years later, a few years later, as an outstanding Spanish language teacher whose work as an online language teacher is impacting kids all across her state. Trixie, congratulations.
Well, thank you so very much. I just wanted to say that I appreciate all of you who know that students are more than a test score, just like I knew I was more than a test score. And thank you so much for all that you do, and I am just honored to receive this award. Thank you so much to my family, Virtual SC, my friends and colleagues there, and thank you.
Thank you. So that's one final round of applause for all of our award nominees and our winners. Congratulations. It's an honor again this year to be able to kick off the next phase of our keynote, our student panel. And again, I go back to the word amazing. I think that we're about to have about 30, 35 minutes of an amazing journey with some amazing students. I'd like to introduce our facilitator of our panel this afternoon. It's Andrew Brennen from Student Voice. Andrew Brennen is a sophomore from the Robertson Scholars Leadership Program at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, where he is majoring in political science. I heard some Tar Heels in the back there, Andrew. When Andrew was a junior in high school in Kentucky, he co-founded the Pritchard Committee Student Voice Team in 2002. In this capacity, Andrew helped launch and lead a number of projects that amplified student voices and got them involved in the process of really helping them, making sure that they have the educational opportunities that they should have. These projects included successful student-led campaign to restore $15 million for low-income student scholarships in Kentucky. His work led to the drafting and promotion of House Bill 236 that added students' voice to the screening process of superintendent selection committees. It led into an investigation into what are the tripwires that prevent high school students from making smooth transitions from high school to college, and a student voice audit of local junior high schools to engage students in improving school climate. In January of 2016, Andrew took on a new role as the National Field Director for Student Voice, a national organization with the goal of bridging the gap between students and the educational committee. And in his role as Student Voice, Andrew has led a nationwide tour with the goal of engaging thousands of students across the country through a platform called the Students' Bill of Rights. Andrew draws his inspiration from the quote, "When we tell our stories, we change the world." Please join me in welcoming Andrew Brennen.
So they told me not to be nervous. What they did not tell me was the number of people that would be in the audience. It's always hard to follow that kind of introduction, and so I want to just go ahead and ground myself again. My first D was in 4th grade. I'm addicted to social media and my cell phone, and I never remember to do the dishes, as my mother will tell you. But as Bruce mentioned, my name is Andrew Brennen, and I'm the National Field Director for Student Voice, an organization founded and run by students. I'll save the entire elevator pitch for another time, but I'll say this. Our mission is to empower students as partners to close the sadly pervasive empathy and equity gaps in our education system. I've spent the better part of a year traveling the country, holding roundtable discussions with students from diverse regions, races, and backgrounds. These roundtables are a chance for students to provide their views on what is working and what is not working in our schools and classrooms. Often I'll begin with the question, what can you tell me about your education, your school, or your classroom that you think the adults in your school building don't know? These conversations always begin the same way, slowly. You see, students are tasked with thinking critically about everything from history to algebra in school, but rarely are they asked to reflect on the educational process itself. Why not, I wonder? So, as I'm sure many of you teachers have done before, I have to resort to a process of poking and prodding to get someone to answer the question. It's as if they need permission. But after the first round of awkwardness, the floodgates open, and their responses often leave me speechless. In London, Kentucky, a tiny, tiny 9th grader in the softest of voices said, "I can tell you which one of my friends goes home and does drugs with her parents." In Iowa, a hooded African-American boy slouched in his chair and muttered, "I think I'm addicted to sadness." In a Los Angeles charter school, a student responded by stating that though Black students made up just a small percentage of the student body, they make up a disproportionate number of suspensions and expulsions. He followed up his claim by not only providing the exact numbers, but also his indicting analysis that found that most of the suspensions were due to defiance. Many of you know this intuitively, but it's worth saying out loud. Every single student that walks into a school building does so with a life's worth of baggage. They have experiences, traumas, memories and habits, disabilities, abilities, strengths and weaknesses. And figuring out how to adjust for all of those things and how you create, deliver, and evaluate educational programming can seem like an insurmountable challenge. But I hope today's conversation, and perhaps even this entire conference, helps to reinvigorate all of you, because you're heroes. While the task is certainly not easy, it is profoundly important work, which we believe is the key to unlocking the potential for huge numbers of our students. I also want to humbly suggest that there is an enormous, largely untapped, supremely creative resource which is uniquely qualified to partner with you. This force, in fact, is literally and figuratively sitting before you almost every single day. And it can do more than just about anything else to help ensure you can deliver personalized and effective deeper learning. And I know that you all know who I'm talking about. So without further ado, let's talk with some students. I'm bringing 5 students on stage now who we've met throughout the course of this tour, starting with Jack Bradley, a junior at DuPont Manual High School in Louisville, Kentucky. We can clap for these students. Rachel Bradley, a sophomore at Kentucky Country Day School, a private school also in Louisville. These two are related, if you can't tell. Gentry Fitch, a sophomore at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, studying history. Also from Kentucky, Nicholasville. Amanda Walsett, a first year at Wellesley College from Knox County, Kentucky, southeastern Kentucky, studying computer science and education policy. And finally, Muhammad Munir, a graduate from Highline High School in Seattle, Washington, currently taking a gap year, and originally from Kenya. So let's talk. Gentry, let's start with you. All right. You grew up in a rural southern community and experienced all of the opportunities and challenges packed within that. But you also spent the past summer teaching middle school students in urban New Orleans, as part of the Breakthrough Collaborative. Could you share with us some of the similarities between those experiences, as well as some of the differences, particularly around learning in the classroom?
Yeah, so I want to start by saying it's really awesome to be here. Being in college, I don't get to talk to educators as often, so getting to talk to thousands of them at once is really a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, so thank you. I feel like I should first begin by talking about kind of the context of where I grew up. I grew up in Jessamine County, Kentucky, which is about 25 minutes southwest of Lexington, so any Kentuckians in here know how beautiful it is. But it definitely is also kind of the classical rural town. Walmart moved into our city, I think 30 years ago, and unfortunately, a lot of businesses left as a result, and that was a huge source of identity for a lot of people. Another fact that I like to bring up is that I'm pretty sure that we have the most liquor stores per capita in the state of Kentucky. So if that's not indicative of enough, I'm not sure what is. But it was a really homogenous population. It wasn't at all very diverse. A lot of people had the same kind of experiences over and over again. And I was kind of unique in that because I'm gay. And that was definitely difficult in the context of this Bible Belt city, kind of struggling with my personal identity in the midst of a very homogenous population. And so as I was growing up, I felt very different from people. I couldn't connect with people, I felt like, on the same level that other students could, until my superintendent, Lou Young, who has since moved on to the University of Kentucky to do some education research, asked me to sit on a superintendent student forum. And that was the first time that I really felt that I was valuable and that my experience meant something. And that came as a student. And that happened in 4th grade. And throughout that, I really started to gain confidence and identity and self-value and self-worth throughout education. And as I thought about that more critically and went through school, I really started to see the effects of kind of this homogenous population mixed with leaving businesses. And a lot of students I talk with would oftentimes not know where their next meal was coming from. And that helped me realize the immense privilege that I had just to know that I was going to have dinner the night after that. And so I began thinking more about, my education experience more critically, and I found that, living in Jessamine County, in a lot of ways, prohibited me from kind of seeing the outside world and being able to empathize with people. And that's one of the reasons that I really wanted to go to New Orleans, because it was so vastly different from what I experienced. I grew up in a rural community, and New Orleans was a very urban community. I also really wanted the perspective of a teacher. I had always been a student my entire life, and I needed to feel what it felt like to be in the classroom dealing with 7th graders, teaching math. And one of the biggest continuities that I saw was that identity played such a huge role in how students consumed education. So often I would listen to students that would say, I'm not really going to go anywhere. This doesn't matter. My parents are forcing me to go to this program, but my dad went to jail, or my mom is addicted to something, or whatever the story might be. And I saw how much that affected their expectations. And I've been playing with this idea in my head called the expectations gap, and I'm sure you guys see this in your schools as well. But the expectation of a student and the culture around them so deeply affects how they consume education. And it was the biggest similarity that I experienced was that the identity of people and the people that they were around, the culture that they lived, told them that they were going to be A or told them that they were going to be B, and don't rock the boat, essentially. But that's why I value so much being gay, because for me, that told me that rocking the boat isn't necessarily the worst thing in the world. In fact, it can be very helpful. So I'm very thankful for that, and the New Orleans experience was definitely valuable.
And Gentry, your experience is so important during a time of such great division in our country. The idea that the soft bigotry of low expectations is something that is colorblind and affects students in the most rural and the most urban communities across the country. Jack, you are considered both gifted and disabled. Some people would use the word twice exceptional to describe you. Can you tell us about what school is like for you?
Like everything in my life, it's complicated. I spend half my days in accelerated classes and the other half in special ed. I didn't start talking until I was almost 3, but it was worth the wait because my first word was wow. I didn't learn to read until I was almost 10, but 2 years later, I won an award for my ACT score in reading, a 34. When I was 14, I actually got a perfect score, but I had to have help writing this. Unfortunately, the ACT does not measure what I'm most proud of, overcoming my fear of going up on the stage to receive the award. If I hadn't done that, I probably could not do this. I have autism, ADHD, and Tourette's, which make my life pretty challenging. Sometimes it seems like people think I've consciously chosen to have a brain that is physically different from others. Nope, I do not have a designer brain. When it takes me longer to finish a test or when I need to get up and pace, believe me, that's not what I would have designed. Would you? A lot of time, I feel like I am on trial, that I have to prove that I need help. That's how it is with hidden disabilities, which, by the way, 70% of all disabilities are. Mostly I was homeschooled because we couldn't find a school that wanted me or was a good fit. I did go to a school for kids with learning differences for 3rd grade, though. At the end of the year, they said we needed to find a new school because I scored too high on standardized math tests. The funny part is, they had put me in a remedial math class because I couldn't read the story problems. It took several months and my mom pushing before they realized that not being able to read didn't mean I couldn't do the math. I've taken a lot of classes in many different schools and also online, including university courses. I've attended more camps, programs, and conferences than I can remember. For the moment, I'm in a public high school because I need to learn how to be in that kind of setting. It's okay, but not great. My teachers are really nice. They try hard and care a lot, but my general ed teachers have to teach to the AP and other tests, which makes for mostly boring classes, and my special ed teachers are not trained to teach me what I really need or to help me with subjects like Calc BC. A lot of the time, I feel like a lot of my time in school is wasted. Instead of motivating or inspiring me, it just leaves me feeling exhausted. Homework would be mostly unnecessary if what we did in classes was exciting, and if those classes were organized by skill levels instead of grades, more like homeschooling actually. What if classes was long or short as they needed to be, instead of a fixed amount of time? What if, instead of taking tests, the students created them? That'd be so much more interesting and useful. Please don't listen to my story and think, oh, he's just an outlier. Because while that is true in some ways, it's not true when it comes to what is most important. I'm just like each of you when it comes to wanting to have friends, wanting to do interesting work, wanting to feel like I'm heard, and wanting to enjoy my life. I do not believe our election process is rigged, but I do believe that in many ways, our education system is. In 2 years, I'll be able to vote, but I shouldn't have to wait until I'm 18 to be heard. Thank you.
And you know, Jack's story is so important because, as he said, 70% of disabilities are not visible. And so, in order to adjust for these students, we have to figure out exactly what they need. And I mean, as Jack just proved to you, asking him would be a good place to start. Rachel, first of all, you've lived with Jack your entire life, so I'm sure that's been exciting. But in your own right, you've experienced a number of different kinds of education in the short time that you've been in school. Can you walk us through your educational journey and talk to us about when you felt you were learning the best?
Yeah, so I was mostly homeschooled up until the 7th grade, and we supplemented with going to cottage school, a Waldorf school, and a classical academy, all part-time. And I think the homeschooling led to me having this, like, I can do it myself personality. I prefer to try and figure things out on my own before someone tells me if I'm wrong or hopefully right. In fact, I taught myself to read, write, and even type. And I'm kind of the person in my family, if something's broken, like a TV or something, I'm the one to fix it. And I ignore information manuals, you know. So because of the I can do it myself personality, I find that I learn best when my education is hands-on and related to the real world. So in some ways, homeschooling was a good fit for me, and some ways not. Funny thing is, we didn't use a lot of technology, but the things that I remember enjoying most was technology-based. Like, I taught myself to type using a SpongeBob game typing program. It's really fun. And we did a lot of online classes, and we also used the K-12 curriculum. K-12, yeah. Around middle school, I was really missing the social aspect of like normal education, and so I decided to switch to Kentucky Country Day, which is where I'm currently at, a private school. And it was my first time in a school with more than 100 kids in the entire school, and so this showed me all the different ways that things can be taught, because I was used to just having this one homeschool kind of like outside of the normal classroom way. And so I found that when I was taught through project-oriented and interactive activities, I could retain information a lot easier and more quickly, and it was much more fun than having like a lecture-style class, like Jack said. And another thing that I found really great was doing a flipped classroom, which I know is difficult for like classes that aren't like math-related, because that's what we're doing in my math class right now. And in fact, I used that to prepare for this conference 2 weeks ago. I went ahead and just finished all the math chapter I had because all the videos of the notes that we would have been doing in class were already up. And so KCD really triggered my brain into like full swing, and I began to think about what I was being taught and why I was being taught this. And so I've always been asking questions, and one of my favorite questions to ask are, well, why do I need to learn this? And how is this gonna be useful after high school plus college? Why do we have to read to analyze? Why can't we just read for the enjoyment of reading? Weren't books made to be read? And so these questions I tried to ask my teachers, but sometimes I kind of sidestep it. And so I've realized that the more real-world applications I have when learning, the happier I am.
And I think Rachel's story resonates with a lot of us who in the classroom felt like we wanted to be doing more things that were related to the real world. And I never really understood this idea that somehow school wasn't the real world, you know? Like, it doesn't make sense to me. And I don't think it makes sense to Rachel either. I just actually finished reading the book Hillbilly Elegy by J.D. Vance, and I don't know if any of you have read it. If not, I suggest it. J.D. Vance is from an area in Kentucky, his family from southeastern Kentucky, which is also where Amanda here is from. And Amanda, you're one of the first in your family to attend college, and you're doing so at Hillary Clinton's alma mater. The journey that brought you to where you are now is inspiring, though. And like Gentry, you're from a rural high school. Can you briefly walk us through how you got to where you are now, and what you're doing to help others follow in your footsteps?
Yes, so much like Gentry mentioned, my town was very small. People had a hard time getting to school, much less getting to the grocery stores, because it was such a rural area. And so as a low-income student, I noticed all of the things that were happening, and I saw them in my hometown, and I saw them in my home. I saw the poverty of Appalachia, and I saw the abuse and all of the other issues that come in with that. And so that left me feeling disheartened. And I think even despite I had aunts that were in education, and even despite the encouragement of, well, you have to go somewhere, you have to go to college, you need to leave, but stay here as well. Despite that encouragement, I felt so disenfranchised in my education. And it wasn't until my freshman year when I got involved with the Pritchard Committee Student Voice Team, and we were doing research into post-secondary transitions. And when I got involved with that research, I wrote a piece that said, poor students need more from policymakers. And that was the first time that I was in research, but it was so interesting because I was a part of the target group. I was able to own that narrative, and through that, a private college counselor offered to take me on for free. And her mentorship guided me to this program called QuestBridge, which helps low-income students match with some of the top colleges. And so through that, I attend Wellesley College now, and that's unreal. And so that transition that I've made, education being freedom from poverty, education being freedom from abuse, and freedom from all of these issues is something that I've wanted to carry on for other students. And so through QuestBridge, I've been able to mentor students and help them try to figure out, well, where are you going to go, and how is this going to help you?
Amanda's story is so inspiring because what she proves is what happens when you take someone who comes from a place where learned helplessness is the culture, and give them agency over their own destiny. Mohammed, you've recently moved to America 4 years ago from Kenya as a refugee student. So you have moved to a new language, a new continent, and were a high school student teenager. So tell us about what your experience was in school, what worked for you, what didn't work for you, and how this difference affected your classroom experience.
First of all, God bless America. God bless him. God bless him. I moved to United States about 4 years ago. All my life I lived in a refugee camp for 16 years where there's snakes and bad things that you don't want to see. In refugee camp, I went to school only for 2 years. I didn't get education at all. And I came to realize that I had disabilities when I came to United States. I went to 3 schools. I went to Lafayette High School in Buffalo, New York. I went to Foster High School in Seattle, Washington. And then I moved to one of the most amazing districts. I don't know if you guys can beat that. It's Highland High School. My first school that I went to in Buffalo, New York, the principal called me and said, you're not going to make it because you're 18 years old. You have disability and stuff like that. This is how she put it down. And my mom said, we're moving to Seattle. We moved to Seattle. I went to Foster High School. They gave me a transcript. I went to Foster High School. Still, it was, I'm just wasting my time in high school. I'm not gonna graduate. I moved the district to Highland School District. There's an IEP program. A lot of you are familiar with that. They took me in, and one of the teachers told me, you will graduate. You will graduate. I will graduate on time, 21 years old. I pushed myself. I had to push people that, I don't know if they're here, but they're doing big time on my district. I had to push them and prove them wrong that I will graduate and I will have my diploma and I will be one of the people that their voice is gonna be heard to give other students chances to be able to do what they want to do. Because right now, if you guys are familiar with this, every week, this is the United States, the biggest country. We get refugees from different places. Some of them, you as a teacher, push them to say, oh, they're not gonna graduate on time. You guys are sending them to community college, yeah? Which they're not gonna graduate on time. But if you guys could give them something like an IEP, ELL classes in my state, ELL classes, they're not giving them credit. If you're giving them credit for ELL classes, it will help them a lot. For me, I came to realize that I had a big chance, even not taking an IEP classes. Today I'm here, I'm one of the people in my district that they're coming for me asking for different advice. Thank you.
And I think part of what Mohammed has said to me before so eloquently is that when you're working with refugee students, a lot of times you don't know where they're coming from. A lot of these students, Mohammed's classmates, the week prior were in the middle of war zones, and now they're sitting in a 35-person math class. And how can we adjust for students like that? Like has been the theme throughout this panel. I think it begins with asking them. And so the question I want to ask to the whole group, and anyone feel free to jump in on this, can you tell us about a time either when you felt like your voices were being especially heard in school, or when you felt like your voices were being especially ignored?
So in 7th grade, or 8th grade, I took an algebra class, and my teacher proposed at the beginning of the year, we did a few classes normally where we would take notes on the board in class, and then we'd go home and do a worksheet for homework. And we did a couple classes like that, and then we did the flipped classroom, which is also what I'm doing this year in math, where she would send us a video of her doing the notes, and then in class we would do the worksheet and get to talk to our teacher. And this was the first and the last opportunity I've had where my teacher asked me and my classmates our opinion on it, and she wanted to know what worked best for us, and based on our opinion, we got to choose which one we could do. And so that was the first time I've experienced like student voice where I'm being heard by my teachers, and hopefully not the last.
Anyone else? I know Mohammed.
In my district, basically in my school, we have this thing, I don't know if you guys have it, called leadership classes, which is a lot of students, I'm going to tell you guys, they feel like they've been left behind. And in my school, you ask other students, what is leadership classes? And they're gonna be like a bunch of geniuses kids. That's how they're calling them. I went to put a proposal that I wanted to do something at assembly, and one of the people said, no, you cannot do it. It doesn't fit in. And I told myself, I can do it. I can speak, and I'm gonna be loud, and it's gonna be big. I started a club called the International Rescue, which is I bring kids every week on Tuesday. They start to talk about their feelings or where they came from. It's a therapy with no charge. You don't pay nothing. We invite teachers. We invite people to come and talk about it. It gave me a big voice in my district. Then everybody's like, when can we have you? When can we do this? So it made me feel like, oh my God, I'm being respected. And right now, we have almost 35 ELL kids that are doing the same thing because I graduated. So they're taking it and they're taking it to the next level. So that's the time that I felt like, oh my God, they're hearing me right now.
School climate is a hot topic issue right now with the passing of ESSA as states begin to develop accountability models. The question is, what does that last indicator look like? And Student Voice has long advocated for school climate measures, student voice surveys of some sort to be a part of that. But I want to put the question directly to you all now in kind of real terms. School climate. What does a good school climate feel like or look like in your experience, Dintry?
So when I was growing up, a lot of these students that I experienced, and also in New Orleans, and it was mentioned earlier, had this sense of learned helplessness. And that manifests itself in different ways, but most malicious, like I said earlier, I feel like is this expectations gap that a lot of students feel. And when you have, in my experience, when you have an entire swaths of student populations that feel like they don't have any source of or a sense of autonomy or control or influence over how they're educated, not only consuming but producing their education, it really disrupts their personal identity and their personal value. And so when we think about like this aspect of learned helplessness in the context of school climate, it's destructive to school climate because students all the time, and when Andrew and I and Amanda were doing the student voice audit in Kentucky, they felt like they were going to jail, essentially. You go to a school, you go to a place where you are fed information, and oftentimes students figure out how to make it fun, and we have lots of teachers who do a fantastic job at making it that way. But for the students that education doesn't necessarily work for, it's not personalized, it's not individualized, they can't stand it. They go to these classes and they feel like they don't have any control over what's happening to them. So it becomes this kind of monotonous experience where they just feel disenfranchised. And so when we think about closing this kind of this expectations gap and trying to combat learned helplessness, I think student voice is really key in doing that, because when we do that, we give students an opportunity to say that there's something wrong here. I'm not learning from you for X, Y reason. And when you get to that level, you can understand and you can hear the lived experiences of these students, and maybe not understanding only what is the problem, but why it persists and why it exists. And so student voice provides that degree of empathy that closes that gap.
But I really want to hear from anyone on stage, what does a good school climate feel like, look like, smell like? Any thoughts?
Having things that it's like this. This is like a dream. I'm just gonna vision to some of you that probably need new schools and stuff like that. A student should walk in and feel like, not going to college, you're gonna find, I wanna study this. A student should walk into a school and say, I already decide what I'm gonna study after high school. Right away, your freshman year, you already know if you want to be a journalist, you want to be a doctor, you want to be the leader of tomorrow, you want to be the second Barack Obama. Students should know a freshman year what to do. That's what a good school feels like walking into a school. I visited a school in Buffalo, New York. You have to take off your belt. You have to take off your shoes. It was like a prison. Trust
Metal
me.
detectors? Was it metal detectors?
Yeah, it was. And I asked why. They say one school is going through something, so they took the student from other school and put them here. They will never get along. That's like two football teams from another school, and you put them together, they will. Yeah. So good schools should feel like it should be a place that you're going to decide what you want to do, not waiting till your senior year, you're applying, oh, you want to go to this college and stuff like that. No, freshman year, let them decide that.
Yeah, and what it sounds like to me what you're saying is you want to experience a learning environment where you get to take in things that are relevant to your interests and help you develop ideas about your future pursuits. And that really resonates with what Rachel was saying earlier about when she feels like she's learning the best in the classroom. And I want to put the question to the whole group. Did you feel like your experience in high school, did you feel like your academic work was relevant to your interests and to your future pursuits? Jack?
To be honest, not really. The problem, as I see it with schools right now, I'm sure you've all heard the saying, give a man a fish, he eats for a day. Teach a man how to fish, he eats for a lifetime. The thing is, right now, schools are like giving the person the fish. Schools right now are giving us the knowledge, but they aren't really teaching us how to acquire it.
Mm-hmm. How to apply it.
That too. And also, just wanted to say something about school climate. I'm not sure what it feels like, but it should taste like French cuisine.
As we begin to wrap up, I have a question that I want to ask. It's on schools of the future. If you all had to pick one thing that was in your perfect future school, what would it be?
I would say no classrooms. Throughout the summer, a lot of my peers and I, through the Breakthrough Collaborative, talked a lot about like the Khan Academy model. I think it's near San Francisco, and the way that they attempt to do school. And it was really fascinating because when I was a kid, gosh, I loved going and just exploring and trying different things. And we had a creek in our backyard, and every single day I would just go and explore. And bar none, that was the best learning experience I ever had because I got to experiment and play and learn new things. And I saw fish and I saw frogs and sometimes stepped on things, and that hurt. But it was a chance for me to experiment and test out things. I didn't have a tour guide or facilitator, but there were no confines to my learning. And I think when we're going back to school climate, when we're in schools and we're kind of set in silos, you go to your math hallway, you go to your science hallway, English, blah blah blah. You are set in that mindset that English and math are two distinctly different things. But in fact, I'm learning how in college to break down those silos and to see. Oftentimes, math and methodical thinking can apply really well to, writing clear, logical arguments. The arts are incredibly important for me to understand science because, science is part of culture, et cetera. And so I think, in a future world, breaking down those silos, breaking down the boundaries of learning that we've kind of set up in our schools can be immensely productive because it tells students that, learning doesn't only happen within the walls of a school. In fact, it learns everywhere you go. And that's why teachers are so important because those are the people that can help guide us and facilitate that learning and connect dots for us so that we can see connections beyond just the boundaries of the classroom.
Okay. Rachel, one thing.
Okay, one thing.
That your future school.
It's like 3 things. So when we were homeschooled, we would do things like jumping rope to learn and to skip count like 2, 4, 6. And the things that really I think like you mentioned a little bit is kind of trying to learn it by yourself, by like going out in the real world and trying to figure things out is really good for personalized learning.
Well, actually, I have 2 things.
Fine.
For one, there wouldn't be really subjects per se, because everything is interconnected. Like, you can't really sing like this is science and this is math. You need them for each other. So like, right now I'm taking a psychology course, but it's not considered science. And to be honest, I don't know why.
You should research that.
Yeah. Also, it wouldn't be test-based. Right now, most of the classes I'm taking are AP, and so if it's not on the AP test, it's not being taught. Even if it'd be helpful, help us learn, it isn't being taught because it's not on the AP test.
Yeah.
So I would have school be less test-based and more project-based.
So in some ways, you agree with Gentry.
Yes.
So we have a couple of questions from the audience. I'm going to pose both of them at the same time, and you all can respond to whichever one you'd like. The first question, how can we give every student, every single student a voice and allow them to be heard? And the second question is, what is your definition of personalized learning? And we all can't answer the same question, so let's split it up here, y'all. Amanda.
Okay, I think within both of those, I think empathy is probably the most important point here. I think with anything to do with individualized learning, immediately within the classroom, you have to have empathy. You have to have understanding between students and teachers. You have to have understanding between teachers and administrators. And even on a legislative level, you have to have that empathy.
Panel, remind you of the questions. How can we give every student a voice and be heard? And what is your definition of personalized learning?
I'll take a shot on that first one. I think that having organizations within your schools that promote critical analysis and breakdown of their experience is super important, because I would have never thought to think critically about my experience in education if it weren't for my superintendent approaching me. And because there is this sense of learned helplessness, students don't think critically about their education until they're prompted to. But once you kind of crack open that can, a flood of really, really good stories come out, and we begin to close that empathy gap.
Mohammed.
I'm going to answer the first one. Give them chances to do what they want to do, as long as that is not drugs, okay? Give them chances to do something, not just coming to school every day, 6 hours a day or 7 hours a day, and then go back home. When you're in class, take a time to tell them, oh, there's a club that they do this and do that. There's this after school that you can go. That's one way a student will grow up as a leader, and you will see the change quickly.
My definition of personalized learning is learning that tries to show up students' weaknesses and expand upon their strengths, rather than try and get them to fit a certain criteria or a line.
And I'll add on to that with saying that I think personalized learning is where a student is going to sit down with their teacher and they discuss what that student really wants to learn, and if they've experienced all the different types of learning, what has worked best for them and what hasn't worked.
Well, thank you, Rachel. You all have been witnessing somewhat of a live roundtable, and I hope that some of the takeaways from here is the importance of student voice. You would not be able to just tell these student stories based on looking at them. It takes talking to them. It takes creating mechanisms through which you can get feedback and hear directly from students themselves. These folks don't have the advanced degrees that you do, but they do spend 35 hours a week in a classroom. And so they are certainly experts on what goes on in that classroom. So thank you for having us. We really appreciate it. And we'll leave it with that.
Wow. Wow. So about an hour and 15 minutes ago, what did I say? Amazing. Wow. Andrew, Jack, Rachel, Gentry, Amanda, Mohammed, thank you so much. Here's something that you couldn't see while you were up on stage. First of all, you couldn't see how the Twitterverse was absolutely going crazy. with your comments. Powerful, inspiring, enlightening. Thank you so much. Here's something else you couldn't see, because when you stand up here, those neat folks, when you're up here, we really can't see your faces. You're kind of dark. I was down there. There was a lot of this going on. Thank you again so much. Please enjoy the rest of your afternoon. We have, again, amazing sessions for you left for this afternoon and also tomorrow morning. We do have a break, and you can get the time in your mobile app and program book in the exhibit hall this afternoon. Thank you again for making this such an incredible experience. Thank you for all the work you're doing, and enjoy.
I've been losing sleep, dreaming about the things that we could be. But baby, I've been praying hard. Said no more counting dollars, we'll be counting stars. Yeah, we'll be counting